a list of behaviors, individual behaviors that they do, and I ended up with a list of almost 100 behaviors. And then I asked, okay, of these 100, which ones do the workers do, which one does the queen do, so that we can tell them apart. And so I then observed more closely and started ticking off. Does the queen do this, 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 this? Do the workers do this, 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 this? And I came to the surprising result that all the behaviors are performed by all the individuals. In fact, the queen can do all 100 and the workers can do 99 because they cannot lay eggs. That's the only thing they cannot do. But otherwise, the queen is not different from the workers. She can do everything that the workers can do. In hindsight, this is not surprising because very often a colony begins with one queen and then later on she gets workers. So she, in principle, is behaviorally totipotent. She can do everything. So how is she different? Then we said, if she can do everything, maybe she is different in quantity, not in quality. She can do everything, but quantitatively she is different. So we measured behavior quantitatively, and we did this in two different ways. First we said, let us try to calculate how each wasp divides her daylight hours doing different tasks. How much time do you sit? How much time do you walk? How much time do you feed larvae? How much time do you forage? How much time do you fight? And so on. So we try to calculate this. We call this time activity budget. So we budgeted the time of every wasp with the different behaviors they do during the day. So that's one way we did it. Now some behaviors are very, very short duration. If you peck a wasp, it doesn't take any time, it takes fraction of a second. And there it's very hard to measure the proportion of your daylight hours that you spend pecking another individual. So there we used a different measure, a different unit of behavior, which is simply how many times you do it per unit time. So how many times do you bite another wasp in 1 hour? So we call the frequency per hour. So we have frequency per hour with which different behaviors are performed. So we have two measures of behavior, and when we measured this for all the wasps, we had a large data set. The wasp names on the row headings, the behavior names on the column headings, and in the cell for each wasp, for each behavior, we had either the proportion of time spent by that wasp in that behavior or the frequency per hour that behavior is performed by that wasp. So we have this large data matrix, and we call these groups as sitters based on the main thing. So the sitters seem to spend more time than the other two groups in just sitting and doing almost nothing. The fighters spend more time than others, or more often than others. They actually fight with other wasps. They show aggression to other wasps. And the foragers go more often than others, go out and bring food, or bring cellulose fibers to build the nest. So we have three groups: sitters, fighters, and foragers. Now, when I did this analysis in the very early stages of research, I deliberately did not focus directly on the queen and worker. I did not say, what does the queen do? I said, if the queen doesn't look different, why should I treat her differently? So I did not say, what does the queen do? I said, if the queen doesn't look different, why should I treat her differently? So I treated all individuals equal. So another way of saying it is, I did not tell my computer who is the queen. So the computer classified all my wasps and said, these are sitters, these are fighters, these are foragers. And the advantage is now go back and ask, where is she a sitter? Is she a forager? I could ask this post facto, which is much more powerful than starting assuming that she is different, because we don't know that she is different. And at this stage, we expect. See, when you do research, you should always have an expectation. You should not fall in love with your expectation. You should be willing that your expectation is not satisfied, but you should have an expectation. The common expectation was that the queen species of this kind, where the queen is a very aggressive individual. She is really a fighter, and she uses physical aggression and physical, literally harassment of the workers, both to prevent them from being future queens and also from not stopping working. So she makes them work and she keeps them sterile by physical aggression. So we expected that our queens will be in the fighter group. Why there were several fighters, not just we did not, but we expect. But to our surprise, we found, as I said, you should have expectations, but you should be prepared for your expectation to be belied. Our expectation was totally belied. Colony after colony, we found that the queens were not fighters. The queens were lazy sitters. So, how does the queen behave with respect to the workers? The queen of Rocklania marginata is a non-aggressive, non-interactive, meek and docile sitter. Question, answer. Answer is, you can't go and have a party because his answer is very disturbing. How is it possible? If the queen is such a meek and docile sitter, how does she become a queen in the first place? Why would the workers accept her as their queen? If the queen is a bully, then I can understand why the workers accept her, why they respect her, why they don't challenge her. If the queen is some meek, docile, non-interactive sitting somewhere, why should I refrain from developing my ovaries and laying eggs? Why should I accept her as my queen? Why should I not challenge her? So you can see how beautiful answer, very nice statistics, very nice data, but not satisfying because you have to answer it. That is the beauty of science. No time to party. You have to ask the next question. And you are highly motivated to answer the next question because you have an answer which requires justification. So the next question is, how does she become a queen? So it was clear that we needed a new kind of experimental design, a new kind of research to answer this question. Obviously, we had observed enough, both qualitatively and quantitatively. More observation is obviously not going to answer this question. So we have to do an experiment. Remember, nature reveals its secrets with experiment. So we said, what kind of experiment should we do? We want to know how does she become a queen. So we must watch her in the process of becoming a queen. We have watched her after she has become a queen. So we cannot say how did she become a queen. So how do we watch her in the process of becoming a queen? Now we know that in such species, if you remove the queen, one of the workers becomes the next queen. Not in the presence of the queen, but if you remove the queen, if the queen is lost or dies, one of the workers becomes the next queen. So that is when you can watch. So we said, okay, let us experiment, which lasted 3 days. We did this with several colonies. On the first day, we would study all the wasps with the queen. Now, study means here, mark all the individuals, measure their time activity budgets and the frequency per hour with which they perform different behaviors over an 8 or 10 hour period throughout the day. We get this data for all the wasps. That is day 1. On the next day, in the morning, go in the first the queen and the rest of the colony in exactly the same way as we did yesterday, except now they don't have queen. We did this for the second day, and while we were doing this, we had placed the queen in a glass vial with a drop of honey, and at the end of the day, the queen was quite happy sitting there, and we wondered what should we do with it. So I said, well, let's put her back. Why destroy the colony? Because our experiment is over. It all may be interesting to see what happens if you put her back. And to our great surprise, we found that if you put her back, nothing happens. Like a queen, and the workers accept her like a queen. So this was fascinating. So we said, let us repeat the study on the third day. So first day we have with queen, without queen, and with the queen returned. Same data, same individuals for the whole day. And now we can look at this data and see whether we can learn anything. Actually, the results of this experiment, very early experiment, are absolutely fascinating. What we found was that in a normal colony with the queen, there is a certain amount of aggression. There is a certain amount of dominant subordinate behavior. I said it will fight, practice. It keeps happening in the colony. But by and large, there is a peaceful colony. The moment you remove the queen, the colony becomes extremely aggressive. The frequency per hour of these aggressive behaviors, these dominant behavior, shoots up. Almost immediately, in some cases, doubles, 4-fold, 8-fold, 10-fold, 20-fold, 30-fold increase in aggression. So a fairly peaceful colony becomes hyper-aggressive colony as soon as you remove the queen. This is extremely interesting, of course. But what is more interesting is that all of this new aggression, which was shown on day 2, which was not seen on day 1, is by one worker. one and only one worker becomes really hyper-aggressive and shows so much aggression that compared to the aggression shown by the whole colony yesterday, it can be 20-30 fold higher. I'll show you what the data looks like. So this is day 1 where you see queen, the individual became aggressive the second day, and workers very little aggression. But on day 2, can you see the slide with the bars? Okay, so on day 2 you see this worker has shot up her aggression. This is the same worker on day 1 who showed very little aggression. Of course on day 1 we could identify her, but this is post facto identification. Interesting thing is, on back she drops her aggression. So she is only hyper aggressive in the absence of the queen. And if you don't return the queen, also gradually she will drop her aggression to nearly zero as a real queen. And at this time, she becomes a real queen. She actually lays an egg. So if you remove the old queen, one of the workers becomes hyper aggressive for some time and then gradually loses that aggression and then becomes the next queen. And we call this individual the potential queen. Until she lays her first egg, we call her the potential queen. So potential queens begin their careers as extremely aggressive individuals. Potential queens begin their careers extremely, and only later they become weak and docile. So our limited answer to the question, how does she become a queen in the first place? Because she was indeed very aggressive when she became a queen. Only later on she became weak and docile. So you have a limited answer to the question. But you can immediately see that this answer is not quite satisfactory, because if she is aggressive only for a week and she is a queen for several weeks or even months, how does she control the workers? How does she make them work? How does she make sure they don't reproduce later on? So again you have a question. So how does a weak queen inhibit worker reproduction? Because she is not aggressive throughout as in other species. So you can immediately see that this question has to be answered before you are satisfied with the answer to the previous question. Here we proposed a hypothesis. Now we know that in so-called advanced insect societies, the ants, the wasps, the other wasps like the Vespa I showed you, the queens inhibit worker reproduction or regulate worker reproduction by using pheromones. By using pheromones which actually prevent the workers from developing their ovaries. Am I continuing to be audible?
Yes, absolutely.
So, queens regulate worker reproduction through pheromones, not through physical aggression in honeybees, in many ants, and in some of the advanced wasp societies. So we said our wasp, even though it's a primitive, we call it a primitively used social wasp because the queen is not morphologically different from workers. Nevertheless, who knows? Maybe she has actually started producing pheromones, and because she has pheromones, she doesn't have to be physically aggressive. This is the hypothesis proposed, and in order to test this hypothesis, again we have to design a different kind of experiment. Here we designed a very different kind of experiment. We brought wasps to the lab, we fixed the nest inside the cage and released the wasps in the cage, and we studied these wasps for 1 day. Now on the second day, we did not just remove the queen, we removed all the wasps from the cage and we took a knife and cut the nest in half, in 2 parts, so that a roughly equal number of larvae, pupae, eggs on either side, and we inserted a wire mesh screen in the middle, separating these 2 halves. The purpose of this wire mesh screen was to prevent the wasps from going across, but to allow any volatile chemicals to go across. So we put this wire mesh screen, and once the wire mesh screen was in place, we took each wasp, we tossed a coin, and we distributed them randomly either to the left side or to the right side. Heads you go left, tails you go right. Next wasp, heads you go left, tails you go right. And for all wasps, also the queen, because we don't think the queen is any different. To the queen, she gets the same treatment, toss same coin, heads you go left, tails you go right. At the end, we had half the workers randomly chosen with the queen on one side, the remaining half workers on the other side. So you had queen with fragment and a queen less fragment. Wasps cannot go across. Queen is only on one side, but volatile can go through. So this is what the experiment would look like. Day 1, the whole colony, and day 2. On the third day, what we did was we took the queen from wherever she was, whichever side, and moved her to the opposite side without moving the workers. So in this particular diagram, the queen on the left side on day 2, and we moved the queen to the right side and left the workers as they were on the other side. Now, why did we do this complicated experiment? We had the following predictions. We said, if you do such an experiment, prediction is that if the queen pheromone is a volatile substance, it should go through the wire mesh. And if it goes through the wire mesh, the workers on the other side mesh also should know they have a queen. They should not behave any differently compared to day 1. Because the pheromone is everywhere. But if the pheromone is non-volatile, if it cannot go through the wire mesh, then the workers on the queenless side should think they don't have a queen and should behave as if they don't have a queen. And what does that mean? Of course, there should be a hyper-aggressive individual who becomes a potential queen or the future queen because they think they don't have a queen. So we had very clear-cut, mutually exclusive predictions for 2 outcomes of this experiment, and we did this experiment many times. In fact, we have found this particular experiment, although it's somewhat tedious to do, both for us and for the wasps, it's a very, very nice experimental design. You can learn a great deal from this. We have used this particular experimental design of using the mesh for answering many different questions, and at least for one of them I'll have an opportunity to tell you today. So therefore we have done this experiment very, many times. Now when this slide was made, we had already done this experiment 24 times. And in all 24 times, prediction number 2 was okay. Meaning that the queenless side behaved like a queenless colony. There was a hyper-aggressive. And in fact, when we moved the queen from left to right, as we expected from the previous experiment, the potential queen stopped here, which is hyper-aggressive, stopped being aggressive, because now the queen is back. Instead, one of the workers on the new queenless side became hyper-aggressive. Okay, so we have potential queen 1 here, and she goes back to work, and we have potential queen 2 coming up here. This is what the data would look like. First set of bars, you can see almost no aggression. Queen, first potential queen, second potential queen, no aggression. You remove the queen, one individual becomes hyper-aggressive. This is the queen side. You move the queen to her side, and she stops being aggressive. And a different individual who was not aggressive yesterday becomes hyper-aggressive. So whenever there is no queen individual, hyper-aggressive, put the queen back, she drops her aggression. And so we conclude that in Droplenia marginata, the queens appear to use non-volatile pheromones to inhibit worker reproduction. Okay. Now, people often ask us, can we predict who is this potential queen? You remove the queen, immediately one individual becomes hyper-aggressive. Who is this? No, I'm not surprised with this question, because as humans, we are terribly curious about who the next leader will be. We want to know who the next Prime Minister will be, the next Captain will be, the next head of the department will be, the next Vice Chancellor will be. We always want to know who the next leader will be. So everybody would ask this question. Now, initially I would say, I don't think we can tell, because it's not at all obvious who will be, but once you remove the queen, it's immediately obvious. So I kind of parried this question somewhat casually, but the questions became persistent. So every time I give a talk, people would say, but who is this individual? Why only she becomes a potential queen? And after a while, I decided that we must take up this question seriously and try and answer this question. Design a research program to answer this question, because this question is becoming really persistent. When a professor decides that this has to be done, what it means is that the job of the next PhD student. So the next PhD student who came to my lab was told that your job is to predict who will become the potential queen before you remove the queen, and if you do that, you will get a PhD. So the student came to my lab, and being very nice, she said, sure, that's what I'm going to do. And she spent 5 years doing many, many experiments. She discovered many things, published many papers. But in the end, she threw up her hands and said, I cannot predict who the potential queen is. Now, just to give you an example of what she did, was one example. She studied the behavior of all the wasps and showed that the queens and the workers and the potential queens are mixed up. There is no difference between them. The potential queen is not different. In fact, she showed that we cannot predict the potential queen. She is not different by any criteria. She is not the most dominant individual. She is not the oldest individual. She does not show any unique behavior. She does not even have more developed ovaries than the workers. See, all workers have some small level of ovarian development. She doesn't have much more than others. So you really cannot tell them apart. I must say here that this was a long time ago, this was in 2006. In 2020, one of my students probably has found a way of identifying the potential queen, but I don't want to talk about that because the paper is still under review. The referees may knock us down. If the referees agree, then next time I give a talk, I'll tell you how we can probably identify the potential queen. But as of today, if you go by peer-reviewed publications, we cannot identify them. Okay, so fine. I have worked with these wasps for so long that if the wasps still held some secrets, I'm actually proud of it. I've not understood everything. Which is fine. Which is wonderful. These wasps are really very good. Okay. But the next one who came to the lab said, okay, we cannot predict. We don't know who the potential queen is. Do the wasps themselves know? Do the wasps know who their next leader will be or next queen will be? Now, interesting question. Only this is whether we can answer such a question. In fact, many people told us this is not a scientific question. How can you know the mind of a wasp? How can you know what the wasps know and don't know? But this student was very persistent and she spent a lot of time. We discussed and debated and quarreled over this, and we came up with various experimental design possibilities where we might be able to answer this question. Do the wasps know who their next queen will be? I must tell you that we actually did some experiments and threw out the data saying that there is a flaw in this experiment. But finally, I think we hit upon an experimental design from which we can, I think, actually answer this question. And I'll try and explain to you how we did this, because this is a very slight different philosophy of experiment. First of all, I must say this is where again we use the mesh experiment, where we divided the colony in two parts and put a mesh. Now, the way in which we approach this experiment, see, the design is the process is very important. The design is very important. The result is fine, but so here we took a very different approach. We said, let us assume that there is a pre-designated potential queen. We call her here. So the question we are asking is it possible that there is a heir designate? Even though we cannot identify her, do the other wasps know who this heir designate is? Now, the way we approached a possible solution to this question, possible way of answering this question, is let's assume that there is a heir designate. Let's assume that all the wasps know who she is. Now we do an experiment and we make a prediction. How should the wasps behave in response to our experiment if our assumptions are correct? And if they behave in that way, then our assumptions are probably correct. If they don't behave in that way, our assumptions are probably wrong. So, what is the experiment we did? We brought colonies to the lab, marked every individual, cut them in half, put a wire mesh, queen and half the workers on one side, queen and half, exactly like before. But we made the following argument. We said, okay, so can you see this slide here where I'm showing two rectangles? Okay. So this is the left side where there is a queen and half the workers. On the right side you have only workers, no queen. But we argued just by chance alone, if there is a pre-designated heir designate, she could be by chance alone the opposite side of the queen. And if she is here, this we know that this part of the colony behaves as if they don't have queen. There should be a potential queen, and of course the heir designate will become a potential queen, meaning she will become hyper-aggressive. This is our expectation. However, she is the heir designate for the whole colony, not just for this side. So she should also be acceptable to the wasp on the other side, if she is the true heir designate. So to answer this question, we simply exchanged the hyper-aggressive individual on this queenless side and the queen on the opposite side, and we said the potential queen, the heir designate, so she becomes a potential queen, and when we move her to the other side, she should also be acceptable to those workers. Move her back, she should be acceptable to everybody, because only then we can say she is true heir designate, because the heir designate we assume is known to all the wasps, not just on one side. However, this situation can only occur in about half the experiments. In the other half experiment, by chance alone, the unfortunate heir designate would be sitting next to the queen, just by chance. And she can't do anything now, because the queen is there. She cannot become hyper-aggressive. So, but these wasps on the other side will think they don't have a queen, and the best among them will become hyper-aggressive. But she is not the heir designate for the whole colony. She is only the best for her side. So, if she becomes, she becomes here. Now what I will do is I will interchange these two and bring the potential queen face to face with the heir designate. Now all hell should break loose. Because heir designate says, I am the heir designate, the potential queen is already become hyper-aggressive and there should be conflict. And in fact, our prediction is that the potential queen should be knocked out and the heir designate should become hyper-aggressive. Let us call her PQ2. Okay? But that's not the end of the story. Because if PQ2 is the heir designate for the whole colony, the acid test for her is that we move her to the opposite side. And the opposite side workers, although they have experienced a different hyper-aggressive individual an hour ago, now should accept her as their queen. So that is the acid test for that individual. And this should happen in about half the experiment. So our predictions are that the first potential queen should be unacceptable to the opposite side in about half the experiment, and a second hyper-aggressive individual, PQ2, should show up. And that one should be accepted both sides, so there should never be a PQ3. There should never be 3 contenders to the throne if you cut the nest only 2 parts. There are also 2 predictions. Now, this student who came up with this, these, as you can imagine, these are extremely tedious experiments to do, but she spent a lot of time. I think she spent almost 2 years doing these experiments, and she managed to do these experiments 8 times. In 3 of them, she found that PQ1 was successful on both sides. No challenge. So this corresponds to the equation where the heir designate by chance was on the opposite side. But in the remaining 5 experiments, the PQ1 immediately lost and a second individual, PQ2, became hyper-aggressive on day 2 and she was successful on both sides. So both our predictions were upheld. PQ2 emerged in about half the experiment, not in the remaining half. There was never a PQ3. And therefore, both predictions were upheld. So, the wasps behaved as we predicted they should behave if our assumptions are correct. So, we believe that our assumption is correct, that there is a heir designate. But it's a little bit of a stretch to say that all the wasps know her. And that we are confident, not because of the statistics I showed you, but because of a simple observation. We found it very remarkable that the potential queen 2 was never challenged. She came face to face with the individual already hyper-aggressive. She did not receive a single act of aggression from PQ1, either when she became or when she went to the other side. She was automatically accepted by everybody, even though she came late, so to speak. And that is why we think the heir designate was obviously known and acceptable to all the wasps, including the PQ1. Even the PQ1 knew, not my turn. I thought she is not there, but now she is there. It's not my turn. And the PQ1 actually quietly went back to her. She didn't have to be shown any aggression. She didn't have to be told. She immediately realized that she is not the one and went back to her. Now, this was a very, very happy moment for us. And the main reason is that whenever I gave this talk, people would ask me, do you know who the potential queen is? And my answer would always be a sheepish no. Now I was able to say, but we know that the wasps know. We don't know, but we know that the wasps know. And I'm very, in spite of all the complaints we have about referees and editors, I'm very proud that the editor of biology letters allowed us to use this title. In fact, we published a paper, We Know That the Wasps Know. And we call these as cryptic successors to the queen. So there are cryptic successors known to them, but not known to us. That's the interesting. So the conclusion is that there is a heir designate, even though we cannot identify her in the presence of the queen. The next student who came to the lab, students always are not very satisfied with the previous student's result. He said, yeah, that may be true, but how do you know there's only one heir designate? Maybe there is more. I said, find out. So he did a very interesting experiment where he would remove the potential queen, remove the queen, allow somebody to become potential queen, and immediately remove her and see what happens. And when he did that, he found, to our great surprise, that he removed, in the beginning, nobody is aggressive, not even the queen. Remove the queen, one and only one individual becomes hyper-aggressive. Remove her, of the remaining, one and only one becomes hyper-aggressive. Remove her, of the remaining one and only one. Remove her, one and only one. So you can do this series of times, and you can have queen, PQ1, PQ2, PQ3, PQ4, PQ5, one and only one individual. So there is in fact a queue of potential queens, but waiting their turn. They don't jump the queue, they are waiting for their turn. And we can show, I'll show you here, that all these potential queens are never challenged. These red bars are the they showed, and the blue bars, which are essentially zero, are what they are supposed to have received. And then it is. So they were not challenged. So PQ1, 2, 3, 4, 5, when their turn came, they became aggressive and nobody challenged them. And that's why we think there is a long queue, at least 5 potential queens, because the experiment will stop there, but perhaps all the individuals are lined up in a queue. And we find all this extremely remarkable. But we're not satisfied. Why are we not satisfied? We are saying, if there is so much peace, order and cooperation, is there no conflict at all? It's hard to believe that in a society there is no conflict. Is there no conflict? And we said there must be conflict. We have to find it. I must confess that we were itching to see a fight. We wanted to see the wasps fight. And we wanted to understand, where is the conflict? Why are they not showing conflict? Why are they so peaceful? Why are they so cooperative? Why don't they accept? Why doesn't the wrong one stand up and say, no, I'm going to be the queen? Why? So we wanted to understand conflict. So we realized that we must design different experiments to uncover any conflict that there might be. It's already clear to us that they are hiding the conflict from us because we haven't seen it. So we must uncover that conflict. So we asked a different question. We said, how does the queen maintain her status? And why does she lose it sometimes? Because we know that in nature, after some time, the queen is replaced by one of the workers. The queen is lost and one of the workers becomes the next queen. After some time, she goes another. So sometimes she loses her status, but most of the time she maintains her status. So we asked, how does she? So here again we proposed a hypothesis. We said she maintains her status because she has this pheromone. And we know from experiments, which I'm not going to show you today, that she rubs that pheromone on the nest surface. She has a pheromone, non-volatile pheromone, which keeps on rubbing on the nest surface, and because of that, the workers know that they have a queen. And if she's not rubbing, then they don't have a queen. So we said, let us stop the queen from rubbing her pheromone on the nest, so that the workers don't know, they think that they don't have a queen. Even though the queen is there, let's see what happens. Now, how do you prevent the queen from rubbing her pheromone? We know that the pheromone is produced in a gland inside the body, and there's an opening to the ventral side of the abdomen, and that's how she rubs the pheromone on the nest. So people suggested that we should block that opening, put some paint there or wax or nail polish, and I found all that too disturbing. So we designed a very different experiment. We said we will prevent her in a very different way. We go to nature, we study a colony, we identify the queen, all the workers, and then we bring all the wasps to the lab, not the nest, and we put them in a cage. So now here you have queen and workers, but no nest. So what can she do? She cannot rub her pheromone on the nest, and therefore the workers should think that they don't have a queen. Now, we did this experiment, and to our great surprise we found that she was not overthrown. Now, why was she not overthrown? Now look carefully at her behavior. She didn't have a nest to rub her abdomen and rub the pheromone, but she frantically rubbed her abdomen all over the nest. The queen and all the workers were transferred to a cage and deprived of their nest. The queen continued to rub her abdomen on the walls of the cage and thus maintained her status. But then we argued that the same amount of pheromone, instead of rubbing it on a small nest, if she is spreading it all over the nest, it must be very dilute. And there must be some effect of this dilution. And indeed, there was an effect. For the first time we saw that the workers actually attacked her. She on her part kept rubbing, thinking I am the queen. And the workers said this is not good enough and attacked her. So for the first time we saw workers attack the queen. Even more interesting, we found that the weak, meek and docile queen attacked back. She retaliated, and for the first time we saw workers attacking queens, queens attacking workers, which we normally don't see in normal colonies. So clearly there is conflict, but that conflict is kept hidden from us unless you make this very unusual situation. So there is potential for conflict, but it is usually prevented from the fore. And that I think is an extremely interesting observation. The wasps do not allow conflict to go out of hand. We did one more experiment to understand conflict, and that is we asked, what do the wasps do to outsiders? What do they do if wasps from other colonies come to their colonies? And we did an experiment to answer that question. How do they treat the wasps? So the experiment was that we brought all the members of one colony and released them into the cage of another colony. So here was a cage, a resident colony with their nest and workers and queen and everything, and we brought foreign workers and their property inside. And when we did that, we found extremely interesting results. We found that the young alien foreign workers, they were not shown any aggression. In fact, they were simply freely allowed to join the colony. But the older workers from the foreign colony, they were allowed to live in the corner of the cage, but were not permitted anywhere near the nest. Don't come anywhere near my nest. You can live in that corner. Most interestingly, the foreign queen was located wherever she was, and she was torn to pieces. She was attacked and she was killed. So you can also see how nuanced their treatment of foreigners is. Everybody is not treated equally. The queen is killed, workers can stay far away, young individuals can freely join the nest. And we asked, so there is very nuanced behavior, and we asked them what happens to these young individuals which are allowed to join the nest. So we followed them for some time, and we found to our great delight that young alien workers were accepted into foreign colonies. They become completely integrated into their foster colonies and become normal workers, even become future queens. And we were able to show statistically that the probability of a foreign worker becoming a queen in the new colony is directly proportional to the number of foreign workers. So she doesn't even have a disadvantage, just based on that proportion. So I want to come back, pause and say, can we understand an insect society? And as I said before, I leave the answer to you. You decide whether we have understood something. Since I've told you what we did, you probably have different questions, different ways of answering those questions. So I leave that to you. But I want to end by spending 3 or 4 minutes. Why should we care? Why should we worry about that? Now, the conclusion from this is the wasps have a great propensity to make war with outsiders and an equally great propensity to maintain peace with outsiders. They killed the foreign queen, but inside they are extremely peaceful. From an evolutionary point of view, war with outsiders is easier to explain than peace with insiders. Because what is the use of having war with outsiders if you don't have peace inside? War with outsiders is not of much use if you cannot combine peace with insiders. And I think it is this dual strategy, this ability to tread a fine balance between conflict and cooperation, conflict with outsiders, cooperation with insiders, that is what accounts, I think, for the great success of insect societies. Insect societies are among the most successful animal species. They maintain large biomass, large population, large number of people. They are extremely successful, and also ecologically and also as colonies. In fact, we call them superorganisms. And I think that is what makes them a superorganism, because of this combination of conflict and cooperation. I want to end by saying that all of this work was done first with no money, almost no money, no great instrumentation, no great technology, nothing, but a large number of students, a large number of passionate students. And okay, I have 2 more slides. I want to just reflect on this thing a little bit and say, but we humans are the same. We are not very different from them. I'm very fond of quoting the French philosopher Voltaire, who made a very interesting statement. He said, it is lamentable that to be a good patriot, one must become the enemy of the rest of mankind. And you can see parallels here. Come back to why do I study? I said for saying I certainly do not think that we should imitate animal societies. Right? We should imitate nature. Nature should not tell us what to do. We can ask nature, how is an anthropologist? So what lessons do I draw? How to do something? But in this particular case, I think that was to understand. That is why we study primitive societies. We don't want to imitate them. We don't want to live like the people in Papua New Guinea or the but we want to understand ourselves. And that is, I think, the reason why I study these lessons. So I want to come back and say that I really want to thank a large number of students who are working with instruments and chemicals. Sophisticated instrument, and they take me to a room full of people, and the poor students take that sir, I did and after this award, sure, they are the heads of the sophisticated I work with rather than with machine, and I because that's how I work and that's how I enjoy working. So we had to have effort. Thank you very much, and if this time I will be happy to. Thank you.
Thank talk was beautiful. Taking questions, small sweet questions, followed by rigorous experimentation, and then coming up with small sweet crisp answers, which still leave you a little hanging, leading on to the next question. I think one thing that the talk is beautifully showed is, I mean, it has emphasized the beauty of experimentation, and I always talk to students, and as I'm sure you know, many students are best in curricular science. Now, it's not about the instruments and techniques that you use. It is about how smartly and beautifully design the experiments, and how well you can speak the language of the animal, or you can attempt to speak the language of the animal. We have some questions here. Uh, I have one question. What will be the scenario in case, after removing the queen, a queen of a different colony is introduced? So not the hair designate. We don't allow the hair designate to take place, but we introduce a different colony queen.
He will be killed.
She'll be killed. All right. And is that because the pheromones differ, or is there any reason?
Queue of potential is waiting here. Why do they want a foreigner?
Okay. Right.
Within half an hour, you can have the next queen coming from that colony. So they will kill her.
All right. I really liked seeing the markings that you have done. I'm assuming these markings are on the head, thorax, and abdomen that you're doing.
Thorax and abdomen, the easiest place to mark. And if that's not enough, we also put a little bit on the wing parts.
Right.
So we have 10 different colors, and as you can see, if you have two different parts of the body, you have already 111 possibilities. And with 3 parts of the body, 4 parts of the body, it increases exponentially. So we can really mark thousands because we have different colors and different parts of the body, and we name them accordingly. So R dash means red on the thorax. R means red on the thorax, red on the abdomen. Dash R means red only on the abdomen. YR means Y on the thorax, red on the abdomen. So you can see we have developed a system in which we can name thousands of wasps depending on. And so immediately you can recognize a wasp. If it has a yellow spot on the thorax and red on the abdomen, she's YR.
Mm-hmm. So one student is asking, can the aroma of the color labels affect the communication?
Yeah, so we worried about that, and we therefore use a very special kind of paint which is non-toxic and non-smelling and manufactured with great care because it's actually made for children to paint their hobby objects.
Right.
So, and this is the very, very special paint. And in fact, I'm also very proud of saying that this is the only item of our research which we import from America. All my student heads are from India, but this one item we import from America because it's a very special kind of paint. No smell, dries very quickly, and stays on the wasp body entire lifetime. But specifically done experiments to see whether it seems to affect, it doesn't. If you don't mark them carefully and have too much paint, then they will scratch it and remove it. But if you mark it carefully, it seems to have no effect on it, and there is no smell.
Alright. So one question is that why is the queen becoming meek and docile after being hyper aggressive as the potential queen designate?
Why?
Yeah, why?
Because she now has a pheromone. And in fact, we did this study, one of my students did a very detailed study. From a large number of colonies, he followed these workers from the day the queen was removed to the day they became the queen. So over a period of 5, 6, 7 days, you see. So during this period, he found that the potential queen first becomes hyper-aggressive and then gradually loses her aggression. She has almost no ovaries at the beginning. Within a week, she develops her ovaries. And if you look at the pheromone profile of the worker, she has a worker-like profile. And over a matter of week, that worker-like profile of chemical profile of the pheromone is converted into a queen-like profile. So within a week, she has a queen-like pheromone. And once she has that pheromone, the workers respect her and she doesn't have to be aggressive anymore.
Right. We have so this is basically a student is asking that what all parameters have already been checked for determining the new potential queen from our side?
Okay. So what we have done so far is we looked at, of course, we looked at morphology, there is no difference. We looked at behavior, there is no difference. We looked at age, you cannot predict on the basis of age, although queen is from amongst the older individuals, but which one of them we don't know. We looked at behavior and we studied behavior in very complicated statistical ways. So far, she's not unique in age, in body size, or in body shape, or in behavior, or even in the level of her ovarian development in the presence of the queen. Now, the paper which is under review is by a student who has looked at this behavioral data using a more sort of fancy statistical technique. So she's looking at the net. So in fact, this is called multi-layer networks. And she's able to look at many different behaviors simultaneously, and she has shown that we may be able to identify who the potential queen is. As I said, I don't want to make this claim till the paper is accepted, but that may be a possibility.
I'm really looking forward to know how do you, what the results are. That will be a really interesting thing.
It's a bit of a black box. So there's a technique you apply, and then it will tell you who the potential queen is. Because it's basically what you do is you construct networks of interactions between wasps with different behaviors. Layer these networks one on top of the other, and then extract information from all of these networks simultaneously. So it's the process of distilling information simultaneously much more powerful than the ones we have used so far. What this means really so much is not who she is, we already know who she is, but the real thing is that means there is information in their behavioral interactions which can be extracted for understanding. That means it is already there. It is not completely right, it is not random. It is there. That's the interesting conclusion for me. It's not a completely random process. It's not that, they toss a coin and decide who will become the next queen or who will be 2, 3, 4, 5. But there is information there. It's just that we have become smart enough to extract that information. But as I said, till the paper is accepted, I would not make the claim. Everybody to follow this practice, don't make the claim until the paper is accepted for publication.
Absolutely. So it's interesting, that we have to use such sophisticated tools to understand and to try and find out, distill the information that is already there, whereas the wasps have it inbuilt in them. So who's smarter is a good question to ask.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. It is an important question. In fact, there are many examples of this where animals measure things, come up with things, and behave as if they know something in a very simple way. And this is actually a major field of research. What kind of thumb rules the animals use to draw conclusions, and how they are very different from what we use. And in fact, one way to find out how the animals know something is to fool them. You fool the animals, and then you find out when they are fooled. And because of the fool, then you know what they are.
Those are the questions that we have. I'd like to thank you so much for having taken out time and for having so beautifully and simply explained insect societies in general and that of Rhodopedalia in particular. And I'm sure the students, I loved the article which you did about 50 years in IISc, in which you talked about there being so much diversity on your footstep in the class, and the students would be actually and with more passion than they do currently, and maybe they'll raise their eyes from us within at least Lucknow University campus to begin with. I'd love to have you here, and I was talking to Amitabh Joshi sir that maybe in the future we can have an ISEB function here. ISEB Patiala, which is slated, because I would love to have that kind. Love my students to have that kind of exposure.
Otherwise, I'll be delighted to come. I just want to say one thing. I see that some students are asking some more questions. There is no time, but I'll be happy.
I'll do that.
Questions of students, I always answer.
Actually, 2 questions.
Oh,
she wants to ask them live. Manjari, can you put your daughter on.
Sure, sure.
And Manjari? Yeah.
Thank you, sir, for the very nice talk. Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Anushka has two questions for you.
Yes. How does the queen purple smell like? What does it smell like?
Yeah, what does it
Right?
smell like? And does she work alone or does she have teammates?
She works alone, and we cannot smell. I'm sure the one can smell it, but to our nose, we can't smell it. So you can't hold a queen and smell her as different from others. Unfortunately, we cannot smell. They can smell, and she works alone as long as until she becomes a queen, and then she has the whole team working for her. But in order to be let me tell Anushka that we think she works alone, but it is possible that they are coalitions. It is possible that she has some friends who want her to become the queen and not somebody else. This is possible, and somebody like Anushka should do experiments and find out really whether they work in team. The question is open. Anushka, you have work to do.
Very nice questions, Manjari.
Thank you.
But should you ask questions by email, I'll be happy to answer.
I will definitely do that, sir. Thank you so much once again for being here. It was an absolute honor, sir. Wonderful to have you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, everyone, for being a part of this.
Thank you all the best.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Anjali. It was wonderful.